Good morning. So I'm not Louis Fox, who had very much wished to be kind of the moderator for this session and introduce this series of presentations. But one of the things I share with Louis is that very much admiration for the efforts of the Network Startup Resource Center, Steve Hooter, who spoke eloquently in earlier sessions this week, and the opportunities that for CENIC, Louis is very much interested in expanding our engagement both regionally and internationally. And so we want to very much partner with Steve and the NSRC as part of that outreach effort. And so today we have representatives from the University of Guam, as well as Kenya, and Kenya's NREN. And I'd like to invite Steve to continue the introductions. Thanks.
Hello. So I'm really excited about this opportunity to shine the light on some other parts of the world and help those of us in the U.S. and the CENIC community learn about what's happening and possible ways to engage and do more work with them. So from the NSRC perspective, our work is global in scope, and at the highest level, really what we hope to do is help improve the global R&E network fabric. And then that means, in each portion of it, regionally and at the country level, when there are opportunities to help improve everything from the campus network to the NREN, to improve performance of the network and services for the end users, the faculty, the students, the people that are our real audience, our real customers. So Louis and I had talked a few times, and he said, hey, I see that NSRC does these fellowships with Internet 2 meetings and joint tech meetings and network operator groups, and could we please try to expand this with CENIC? So this is our first attempt to do this, and from recent collaborations and engagements, thought it was a great opportunity to highlight the Kenyan Education Network and a little more broadly African R&E networking and the University of Guam. So we'll have Kennedy Aseda, who will present first on the latest events and what's happening in their part of the world. But I would like to ask, both Kennedy and John, when they open their remarks, to just tell us a little bit about your personal pathway, how you came to be the network manager and for the Kenyan NREN, and John, how you came to be the vice provost of research at the University of Guam, and let us have a little insight as to how you got to where you are today.
Okay, good. So thank you very much for actually the hospitality that you have received here in San Diego. The environment, terrain, the weather, I think is fantastic. When I was coming in, I had thought, we are just getting into spring. And probably it might be much colder than where I come from, but I've seen the weather is not so bad here. Yeah, so Kennedy Aseda is my name. I'm an electrical and electronics engineer by training. When I was younger at the university, you see, I used to go for the electronics classes, looking at waveguides and all those things, Fourier transform and everything. And my actual interest as I proceeded with my university education, I realized that I was more interested in software programming, doing assembler programming, doing a little C here, C# over there. And while I was in university, I was actually doing software, some innovative solutions, going for IEEE student competitions, winning here and there. So when I finished, I tried my hand in some, I would say, startup that didn't go so well. I was trying some solution for hospitals, and I realized that sometimes you can have a good product but selling to the wrong market. So yeah, so at that time actually Professor Kashorda identified me and said, in the country we still need we need more network engineers, and I would like you to just put a hold on the software programming I would like you to program equipment. So that's how I moved from doing assembler language to doing Cisco iOS, to doing Linux scripts and also. And I joined Ckenet in the year 2008. Back then we had around 32 megabits per second, connecting probably around 12 universities. And that's what we had. Mostly it was VSAT, satellite connections. And from 2009, we started an ambitious program in Kenya to interconnect all universities and research institutes to fiber optic connectivity. So in 2009, we added the institutions to around 62, 65 roughly. And we were distributing around 200 megabits per second of satellite connectivity. So at that time, I was a network engineer, mainly doing automating things, trying to make do with what we had. So over the years, I've seen Ckenet grow. I've moved from being a network engineer. Right now, I normally describe myself as a firefighter. So whenever I feel this room is getting warmer than it should necessarily be, I start looking at where could the fire be coming from. So, so I coordinate the effort of ensuring that the network is up, the services are always operational. So I have a team that assists in doing that. So I'll be speaking about building bridges to enhance research collaboration. So this is the map of Africa. I think we don't have a pointer. Okay. Yeah. So this is the map of Africa. The red small red map there is Kenya, and I think I would like to just give some background of Kenya. Kenya has around 44 million inhabitants, roughly. Some background research. California has 38 million inhabitants. Kenya's like geographical area is 581 or 80 thereabouts, 581,000 square kilometers. California is 432, okay, square kilometers. So if you look at like the physical or geographical size of Kenya and California, almost the same. Now, I think I would like someone to take a guess on what is the gross domestic product of California. Anyone? A guess?
2.5 trillion.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, 2448 billion USD, right?
Trillion.
Oh, yeah, trillion USD, yeah. So, if you look at that and Kenyan GDP is around 55.2 billion USD. Okay, so yeah, we are similar, but not really similar. So, and I think if you look at now, if you do the math between 55 billion and what figure did you give us?
2.5 trillion.
Yeah, 2.5 trillion. So around 2,448 billion USD. Okay, so and that gives a ratio of around 2.5. We are 2.2% of the GDP of California. So that's the context. Remember the figure 2.3, roughly 2.3%. It will come later. So, Kenya, I think you have seen something like that before. We run marathons, and in most international marathons, you'll find that there is 90% chance that a Kenyan will win a medal, whichever place you take us, and we have Kenyans running, we'll get a medal. It could be the gold medal, silver or bronze, but we cannot get out empty-handed. Okay. Yeah, it's a fact. And also we are a country of mobile money. Any Kenyan who owns a mobile phone in 1 month, at least they will either have a mobile wallet, or they would have either paid their utility bill or transferred some money on the mobile. And we are not talking about Android phones. Even if you had a Nokia 3310, you'll be able to transact. You are able to send money, to pay your bills, do whatever you want to do. Yeah. So, and of the 55.2 billion USD, our mobile money transfers are around 30 billion. So more than 50% of our GDP is moved over mobile money. Okay. So now to Ckenet. Yeah. So Ckenet is like CENIC. But now for Kenya. So what we do is we interconnect universities and research institutes. And our main goal is to transform education using ICT. There is the red one. I think I'll read it. But my team and myself, what we normally say is we are transforming education using technology. So that's what we do. We do that by ensuring that we are able to provide low-cost connectivity that's reliable. And we just try to ensure that our researchers have the best environment, our students in the country can be able to get the best education, be it from our lecturers, or whether they have enrolled to some MOOCs or some distance learning platform, wherever they are. So now a little more inside Kenya. Kenya is actually, on the northern part of Kenya, the population is very sparse. Most of Kenya is towards the southern part where the population is. And Ckenet actually connects only universities and research institutes, which actually are distributed based on the populations. So we actually operate a network. We have connected around 220 campuses. They could be campuses of universities or research institutes. And mainly we use dark fiber wherever we can. We activate the dark fiber at 10 gigs or at least 1 gig last miles. And we also do have I would say peering in country with Google, with a few of the content providers. And we connect to the outside world using undersea cable capacities on 3 different cables for resilience. And all our cables actually go into Europe. We have to go to Europe before we come to the US. And even that's how even our air travel is routed. We have to go to Europe. Somehow that's how air travel is designed, as well as the undersea cable capacities. Yeah, so next is about how we interconnect. So I will just give a brief. So Ckenet is actually the oval one, AS36914. And we, for our university in Kenya to get to say UCSD, we have to, they have to traverse Ckenet, then UbuntuNet, which is the regional research and education network. So close to Internet 2, but yeah, probably a little smaller. Then from UbuntuNet network, we get into Giant in Europe. Then Giant to Internet 2, Internet 2 to CENIC, and then CENIC to UCSD. So that's how it's all designed. So if you follow the path, you go up, then towards your right. Okay. Now, but we still also have interconnectivity within Sub-Saharan Africa. We have terrestrial connectivity to Uganda, Tanzania, to ensure that we are able to also collaborate within Sub-Saharan Africa. Yeah, so we have peering with Google at around 10 gigs and a few other content providers within the country. So our main work is to provide connectivity to our universities. And the idea is we would like to provide fast, reliable, and cost-effective connectivity. Without that, because if you look at our income per capita, we really do not earn too much. So we have to make do with the little that we have and ensure that we provide value for what our universities are paying for. So even with all that, with limited resources, still our institutions expect SLAs of 99.5%. So in a month, you can't really go down for over 22 minutes or thereabouts. So we have to work really hard with power problems and all that. We normally achieve it, but in some instances you'll find the university itself probably had a power problem and all that. But we have been able to integrate our network monitoring tools so that in case the institution was down because of power problems, and we only monitor our network in-band, so we really don't have out-of-band to the campus. So with that, we have integrated our NMS to be able to tell us whether it is possible the node was offline because of a power outage. So the NMS actually queries via SNMP and checks the uptime. If the uptime is less than the time difference between the outage that we noted, it actually updates the ticket to indicate it was a power outage, so that we are able to have a fine-grained isolation of outages that were due to Ckenet and outages that were due to the institution. So we do a little bit of that. So currently our peak distribution capacity is 13 gigabit per second. I had a discussion with a gentleman from CENIC. He was modest enough to tell me that the traffic in CENIC is not too much, around 550 gigs. Yeah, not too much. But now, if you we are doing 13 gigs. If you do 13 gigs as a percentage of 550, you'll get 2.4%. So if you look at our GDP ratio versus our traffic ratio, we are not doing so badly off. We are comparable to CENIC. Okay? Yeah. So, yeah, because see, you can only do what you are able to do. Yeah. So when you look at how much resources we have versus what we are able to do with the resources, I think we are comparable to CENIC at present. So, and we are still also working a little harder. Right now, 70% of our traffic is delivered locally through peering in country. I think CENIC is around 85% or thereabouts. So we are working hard towards getting there. And our total international capacity is around 6.5 gigs of traffic. For most of our main campuses, we are working hard to upgrade them to 1 gigabit per second, at least 1 gigabit per second last mile connections. Our core network is at 10 gigs. We are in the next 1 year, 1.5 years, we are planning to do an equipment upgrade, and we are lucky enough to have a vendor who will give us equipment that has capability of doing both 100 gig and 40 gigs, so we'll be able to test some 100 gig circuits within the country in the next 1.5 years. Whether we'll get value out of it, we don't know, but we'll because we are an educational network, we have to try a few things. So probably by end of 2018, we'll be having some 100 gig turn-ups that we'll have done. Now, to be able to support that connectivity, we have a few supporting infrastructure. We have some 2 small data centers within our university environment, and we ensure that everything is actually redundant power from, we actually do have dual generators, dual UPSs, dual redundant air conditioning systems, where each unit actually has redundant compressors and all that. So, and we also work hard to standardize our infrastructure from the network equipment to servers to top of rack switches, so that even the support becomes easy. Since the support environment from the vendors in Kenya is normally next business day, we keep some spares in country, so that in case we have a problem, we are able to replace as we wait for the next business day for the vendor to do their replacement. So we have to keep something in country so that we can respond within the timelines. We also a majority open source software, from our network monitoring tools to virtualization platform, almost everything. But we try to automate as much as possible because our operation is 12 hours. We do actually 12 hours in a day, 7 days in a week. So we have set up our system such that we are able to get SMS notifications on the mobile 24 hours a day, so that in case there is something that's major, our teams are able to react to any of the pending alarms, even though we might not necessarily be having a team that is actively monitoring the network, especially at night. Yeah. So, and we do that by taking open source softwares that are close in functionality to what we want. Then we're able to do a few customizations here and there to be able to actually meet what we need. So some of the challenges in building the infrastructure, it's not very easy to get dark fiber in the country. We work with a few partners, but everyone in the country, they look at the business and say, yeah, Ckenet is taking some business out of us. So we continually work with them to understand that, yeah, we are trying to improve the education. And if you have an educated, if the population is receives good education, then it actually has a lot of impact in the productivity of the country. So that's what we try to push for. And in some instances, we actually have dark fibers that don't have SLA. So the provider is not willing to sign an SLA because they do not want any penalties whenever there is an outage. So in some instances, we have fibers that probably go offline and are fixed after 4 days. So we have to plan the redundancies pretty well so that we are able to meet the 99.5% availability that we guarantee to our members. And in some instances where doing optical fiber is not possible due to either terrain or it's a rocky place, we also make use of point-to-point microwave solutions, sometimes in the licensed band. But licenses are expensive, so sometimes we do on unlicensed band. And in some cases, we're able to get even 500 megabits per second duplex on some of the equipment, on some of the links. So we continually look at what's available on the market based on what we would like to cover. So what does it mean to research? Kenya and the US, researchers in Kenya mostly collaborate with the researchers in the US from Indiana University, University of Washington, and a few others, John Hopkins and the rest. And we see most of the research is in medical sciences, biological sciences, or agriculture. Yeah, because most of our researchers are looking at better ways of doing agriculture or trying to solve medical or biological situations that we have in the country or in tropical countries. So that is the array of what is handled. And Ckenet has actually looked at a few solutions, so a few services that enhance the research environment. And one of them is video and web conferencing. So we have a solution that allows our researchers to be able to collaborate with researchers in the US. And we also have invested a little in a web conferencing solution that allows our researchers or faculty to be able to even have webinars. And we actually took open source solution, Big Blue Button, and provided a self-service portal as well as a scheduling system that we built internally to be able to allow our universities to be able to schedule meetings and have recordings of the sessions that they have. We also provide EduRoam, just to inform you, my laptop, my phone, when actually came into UCSD, I actually did not configure anything. I just started browsing. So we offer that in around 20 of our universities. So any of you, when you visit Kenya, if you go to some of our universities, you will be able to use your EduRoam account from the US. You'll be able to get into the university and browse or access resources without speaking to anyone. You see, you don't have to speak to anyone to allow you access. So we do that. We also provide personal digital certificates to our researchers to allow them access high-performance computing as well as grid infrastructures. We set up the Ckenet CA in the year 2015. It was accredited by the European science or grid community, and it's actually an offline CA, which so we actually just set it up with the HSM, and we have a few researchers who actually are using the digital certificates to access the grid infrastructures all over the world. We also provide identity services for the researchers to be able to access applications that are available all over the world whenever they want, probably to access some applications that help them crunch the data or analyze the data and give them feedback on the research that they do. Also, we provide a virtualized lab for training. So whenever we have say students who need some virtual servers, some compute resources, we have some infrastructure that allows them to actually enhance what they have been taught theoretically in a practical environment. That we actually did a pilot with support of the NSRC in the year 2015, and we are continually implementing it to improve. So we finally, on the capacity building, we also try to ensure that our engineers, our colleagues at the universities are able to have good skills, because without a good environment at the university, well-trained engineers actually supporting the university infrastructure is pretty difficult. So this is an image of one of the training we did jointly with the NSRC in the year 2014. So finally, the collaboration opportunities. We are able to, there are collaboration opportunities between Kenyan and US researchers to be able to share compute resources within the different networks, and also for capacity building between universities, between research institutes, as well as education networks, and also an opportunity for Kenyan students to access distance or enroll for distance education opportunities, as well as massive online courses. So that's it from us. I think I'll hand over back to Steve. So probably the questions can come after all the presentations are done. So thank you very much for being very attentive, and my appreciation. Thanks.
Asante, Kennedy. So I think now we'll transition to another part of the world and take a look at what's happening in the Pacific and University of Guam. We have the Vice Provost of Research, who is also an archaeologist by profession, and will give us some insights on what's happening with University of Guam, opportunities with U.S. research engagements and CENIC engagements.
Great. All right, thank you very much, and especially thanks to CENIC, Louis Fox, and to NSRC for supporting me on this trip. Actually, the better, more informed leg of our operation at University of Guam, Romel Hidalgo, also came, and we were going to share this presentation, but we have an NSF workshop back in Honolulu that we're both expected at, and he took the heat to go back there, so I got to enjoy another couple of days of San Diego. Let me tell you a little about Guam first, and then I want to share some of the archaeological challenges that brought me to the region, to the Western Pacific. Oceans connect in the Pacific as much as they do separate. And that's kind of that's something that people say on all the islands that we visit and work with. And networking was fundamental to these islands from the very beginning of their settlement that I'll show you in a minute. But Guam, as you can see here, is in the very far western Pacific. It's about 3,500 miles west of Hawaii. It's about 1,500 miles from the Philippines, Taiwan, or Japan. So we're actually 3.5 hours by plane from almost, well, actually, we're within 5 hours by plane of all the major Asian capitals in East Asia. So it's really a great connection for us. Guam is only 30 miles by about 8 to 12 miles wide. There are 160,000 people. A village in Kenya probably is that size or larger. But even so, we have a legislature with 15 senators, a governor, and 23 village mayors. So half the population lives on the government of Guam. Oh, I didn't say that. But it's a mixture of many different peoples, including indigenous Pacific peoples, but also Americans. Spanish had a modest influence in the 19th century, but Americans since then, a lot of Japanese, other Asians. Pacific Islanders, though, make up half, or a little more than half of our college population. But Filipino is another third of that population. And that sort of mirrors what's going on in the population generally at Guam as well. Everybody's heard about what's called the Austronesian migration, and the term's a little misleading actually, and it's also a little misleading in the sense that it was theoretically positioned as a linear or wave migration. And that's something that I think will appeal to you as networkers, is that as we look at the archaeological evidence and ethnological evidence, that migration was really more pointillistic and mosaic. It didn't go out in waves or lines like this. And in fact, it probably didn't at all go from Taiwan to the Philippines, but more from the southeast China coast, and went out in pulses throughout the region by marine navigators who knew how to sail at sea, even to places they didn't intellectually know were there or experientially know were there, but they knew that there were land masses there from the currents and from later, of course, oral history. So we have places on Guam where we have a star chart of rock art within one of the caves there that one of our scholars, and in fact an IT specialist at UOG, believes was a map to teach celestial navigation to young people. The guy that first piloted the Hokulea was recruited from the islands near Guam. Actually, Maupulig was a navigator from Yap Islands, from the outer islands. And there's a tradition where that last May we had like 30 canoes and navigators and teams coming from all over Micronesia sailing to Guam for the FESPAC. And every one of them came strictly using traditional navigation techniques. So it's impressive, and it still exists. And you can see how closely people live within the islands and how different that is experientially. One of the things that happened historically, I just wanted to show you this because we talk about climate change and how that's going to seriously impact our region. There was a change in climate about 3,000 to 5,000 years ago where sea level was about 1.8 or 2 meters higher than today. That was after the end of the last glacial period. It went up a bit and then came back down to modern levels. You can see what an impact that has on coastlines. And so about 5,000 years ago, that probably was the pulse that started sending people out from southern China and through the islands of Southeast Asia and into the region in several pulses of movement throughout the region. But anyway, they're all still ethnically connected, linguistically connected, and that was a massive, probably I would agree that it's with Peter Bellwether, there probably is one of the most phenomenal migrations in the history of the planet. In the 19th century, Guam became a very bucolic, Spanish-settled landscape. This is one of the villages in the south of Guam. It's still in the south of Guam, very bucolic like that. But today we also have modern development. Tumon Bay is a big resort district. We get 1.5 million tourists a year. It's the leading contributor to the economy. And our economy is probably proportionately about as much smaller from Kenya as Kenya is from California, just as is our networking development. So we'll show you that in a minute. But the Navy then and the Air Force have about 1/3 of the land on Guam for bases, and that's the other main leg of our economy. I was an archaeologist when I first went to Guam as director of the Micronesian Area Research Center, and things that interested me were archaeology in the Philippines, which drew me to the region generally, but also this concept of migration was something I was working on, and then the Spanish colonial landscapes, which were similar to what I'd worked with in the American Southwest. But soon after I got there, we found the thing that all of our isolated universities lack is capacity for people, human capacity. And because I was successful with grants, I got recruited really fast to manage some grants and to go after a big NSF EPSCoR award. Those of you who know what EPSCoR is, probably almost everyone. And Guam had not been in this club, but we got a planning grant. We got a couple of planning grants. We applied once and didn't succeed, but finally about 2 years ago, we won an award. And one of the first things that happened was that when we got the planning grant was that David Lastner came out to visit. And he brought NSRC folks out to help us. And president of the university, Robert Underwood, and I had never heard of cyber infrastructure. Boy, were we in for an awakening, and how crude our system was. And we were bouncing signals to North American back to email someone across the room, basically. It was pretty inefficient. But we got an enormous boost right from the very start. And we're invited to participate in the system and the network that David showed a couple of days ago. And that's where we're headed now. Romel would give you much more detail about all this, and at the end I have a couple of slides that can talk to that. But the other thing we did in a different sense, not necessarily an internet network, but in terms of research networking, the NSF EPSCoR also challenged us to look internally at how we were managing grants at the university, and also how we needed to be outreaching to North America and Asia in terms of building research networks. And that's transforming the way we conduct business at the university. So traditionally we would try to attract people for new hires who were going to go for tenure track, and often we'd find after 1, 2, or 3 years the person really didn't like Guam, or their spouse didn't like Guam, or something would happen and maybe they weren't welcome to stay. There's a huge investment to get people there, and it's a rare person that really stays. That's unfortunate, but then also university careers are more mobile today anyway. So we're trying to instead develop a model where we develop collaborations in other institutions and bring postdocs, visiting professors into the university for shorter term appointments, and then send graduate students out to then join them in their universities. So it's an example of how that whole networking concept is really contributing to our growth at the university. This we developed for the proposal, and it's kind of, it actually, all those points were real. We could add a lot more to those now since this was first developed. But these are human connections, more so than electronic or internet connections. We developed this Guam Ecosystem Collaboratorium, and Joe Danik, if you know him, coined that phrase. It was cute, but it really works. And the point is that we had some centers of, I guess you might call them centers of excellence or centers of focus. One of those was in GIS because of the need for managing resources in the region. And we had some really talented people in GIS. We have a center called the Center for Island Sustainability. That's the president's stepchild, and something he hopes to retire into here in a couple of years. But the GIS Center has turned out to be a real core for development, and of course also fits nicely into the whole development of internet connectivity. We also, as well as the NSF EPSCoR award, we just last July were awarded a NASA EPSCoR award, which is really game-changing for Guam. It's a modest grant. It's only $250,000 for 2 years. but it's already enabled us to go to JPL. We just developed a proposal with JPL satellite people managers with the synthetic aperture radar and PRISM and the whole coral program you probably read about, looking coral reefs worldwide. And we have 2 interns already posted there for next summer. It's growing really fast. We submitted a proposal about 3 or 4 days ago for a cooperative agreement for $750,000 over a 3-year period that will help us connect our coral reef marine science research with other centers around the world, but also with satellite imagery and also with all the sensing networks that are around the world. There's like thousands of NOAA sensors that we can now connect into pretty much instantly. And this technology is happening really fast for us. Again, the Center for Island Sustainability has several things at its base. We do an annual conference. This year it's the 17th to the 20th of April. You're all welcome to come out. It's a hard place to get to, but it's a great conference, and it's become a node in the region now from among all the different islands in Micronesia, which are scattered over an area as big as the continental U.S., and there are now 3 different nations involved in that. The Palau, Federated States of Micronesia, and Marshall Islands are different nations now, and a Commonwealth, Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands, and Guam, of course, which is a territory. But Guam serves as kind of the capital of that whole region, both commercially and intellectually, too, because of the university there. When we first developed our EPSCoR award, we thought natural resource management would be the real focus of workforce development. That's, in the EPSCoR, you need to have a research problem, workforce development, STEM education, and cyber infrastructure. Those are the fundamental foundations for the EPSCoR program. Now, since we've gotten into it, and since there's been an explosion of fiber connectivity in Guam, which was completely coincidental but has taken us happily by surprise, now we see that probably our biggest workforce focus is going to be information technology and computer science. And that's going to be a game changer because of some of the other programs we're connecting this with as well. So private industry is moving really rapidly. There are 4 fiber lines already and another 1 or maybe even 2 that are kind of out there. When you see the GOREX map at the end, you'll see how important Guam is to the whole network connectivity in the Pacific, the entire Pacific. Another large institutional grant that we manage is with National Institutes of Health. It's a Cancer Health Disparities Grant where we partner with the University of Hawaii. And we have many, many partnerships with Hawaii already in climate science and other areas. But the U54 Cancer Grant was really our first big institutional grant. And that's the one that really kind of prepared us to manage or to be ready for this EPSCoR award. These are institutional grants. And before, at UOG, probably like a lot of small universities, individual faculty might have grants, but they weren't connected at all in any way. And because of that, it's really difficult to manage them because you might get a half position for an administrative assistant, for example. I'm sure you're all familiar with this. You put in that 25% FTE or something. We had several of those, and we were going crazy trying to manage them. But now we're building what NIH calls research learning communities, where we can team up those little positions into single positions, and there's more sustainability with several different grants feeding into it. And then also for health career advising and for management of not just administering, but also managing the faculty and the research. So we're developing those research learning communities in the health science areas and now in natural resources with the EPSCoR and in GIS and those sciences through our NASA and other kinds of grants. So this is just basically talking to those awards. Romel's section of this was talking about basically what he's been doing, and he did a lot more detailed analysis here. And I maybe Steve could talk to some of this, because let me go ahead and go forward. But one of the first things that we were urged to do when we got the EPSCoR award, this both by NSF and by David Lassner and NSRC, is hire a CIO. And we did. And Romel's been there a couple of years now, and it's been a huge contribution to our program. You can see just in these accomplishments for his first year there, what a difference that position made in directing our programs at the university. And then NSRC, don't deserve enough, or they don't get enough praise for what they deserve. There was a workshop last July where people were brought in from all over Micronesia to participate in the workshop, and it was focused somewhat on Guam and trying to get us ready for access, but it also applies to the whole region. So we were thinking even a few years ago that the whole Pacific region was going to have to be serviced by satellites. And since then, DOD dropped a cable to the Marshall Islands, and they gave 50% of that to at least to Pohnpei on the way back. So Marshall Islands and Pohnpei now have fiber, and they don't have the computer equipment on their islands sophisticated enough to really even take advantage of it. So that's an area of future planning and future expansion of this whole capability through the region. And of course, we have other problems with submarine cables. Last summer, the cable to Saipan, operated by IT&E, broke. They were without any kind of service, even telephone or cable TV. My goodness, for a couple of weeks till they were able to get equipment in to mend the broken line. Okay, now this map really privileges Guam in the Pacific. You can see the University of Hawaii is just a tiny little outlier island to Guam. David, did he see this map yet? But actually, he would say this too, that actually, and when he first came to Guam 5 or 6 years ago, his message was Guam is going to be probably more, already was, but would probably be more of a networking center for the Pacific than Hawaii. They will be our gateway into North America and into the research education network, but he looked forward to our being their gateway into Asia. So we're going to have, as well as cables going directly to Japan and some other places, there will be fiber going out from Guam that'll go directly to Singapore and Hong Kong and many other, and the Philippines, of course, many other places in Asia. So we're really prepared in the region for major connectivity. And now the stage is set for us to really be working on local preparation, which is what's now happening with our CIO in place and his access to expertise like CENIC and NSRC. And also then throughout the rest of Micronesia, we are rapidly becoming a source of access, but also a source of training and support for them. So it's another period, another stage in what we might call the historical migration throughout Micronesia. This one just as dramatic and revolutionary as the one that happened 4,000 years ago. And we're very thankful to this group and to NSRC for helping us on the way. Thank you very much.
Yeah, fascinating and inspirational update. Thank you. So just briefly on this, as John was highlighting, there's been, just in the last few years now, 4 undersea cable systems that have landed in Guam. Of course, part of that is feeding some of the DoD and military needs, but it's providing tremendous benefits for others. So, you can see on the map we're having other things come in, Internet 2 and Singapore, NREN, that now have this 100 gig connection between them, and will stop here partly for some, regeneration on their circuits, but now realizing that it's a great opportunity to break out and start to create maybe a peering fabric for an open R&E network exchange at very high speed capacities. Now then that, spurred interest in colleagues from the Japanese R&E network, the Australian R&E network, European R&E network, New Zealand. So the hope and ambition is as this evolves, as John said, Guam may become, in fact, a significant hub for, R&E traffic across, all of these regions. So we're in the interest of time, I'm just going to transition quickly to the other topic that Lewis Fox had asked me to address, and that is, how do these partnerships evolve and how do they prosper? From the NSRC perspective, as I highlighted earlier, we try to partner with as many R&E networks and funding organizations around the world as possible. On the African side, we work really closely with Ckenet, the European NREN, which receives some funding from DevCo, a branch of the European Commission, to manage a project called Africa Connect 2. And it's the second phase of fostering a dedicated regional network infrastructure in Africa. Catherine Stover is here as the Chief Collaboration Officer of Ckenet, and some of you may have already met her and can certainly reach out to her to learn more about how that works. But essentially, that's a mechanism to provide this core funding to the dedicated R&E network. And where the NSRC side of the partnership comes in is the human part and the people who operate the network. So we have a really nice, synergistic way of, getting that infrastructure in place, and then the tech people that need to help provide that services for all the end users. In the Guam case, something similar with University of Hawaii, and now we hope increasingly with the CENIC community, which is again part of the reason why we're doing this, fellowship opportunity. So with that in mind, I'll just highlight the way that we hope this might work is that any of the network engineers, IT specialists, people with some interest in these kind of collaborations and furthering them can feel free to reach out, join one of our teams working in the field. We've got, as John mentioned, there's already been a number of things that have happened, but coming up in May, we're going to do a follow-on program of what we call DEA, Direct Engineering Assistance, on the next phase of improvements to the University of Guam network and some of the neighboring islands that John highlighted. And one of our first volunteers who put up his hand is John Hess of CENIC. And so John is going to join an NSRC group to go work at the University of Guam and bring his routing expertise and networking expertise to, basically the approach we take is to just work shoulder to shoulder, with people. We'll make a set of objectives and a work plan for the 5 days of what are their desired outcomes and their requests that they'd like to see happen in their network. And then we'll team up and break out into groups, and it'll be mainly the University of Guam personnel and the others that come from Pohnpei, Micronesia, others, and we'll have teams and break out and go ahead and just do that work for the week. And so John will be in one of those teams, working shoulder to shoulder with all the locals doing their thing. So I guess my pitch to all of you is essentially, if there are others in the CENIC community that would like to do this, and you're a CIO or a manager at your institution, and one of your techies comes to you and says, hey, I'd like to go do this for a week, that you support them. And, we'll arrange to cover travel costs, but what we hope is that, University of California institutions and CSU and anybody that wants to join will be willing to see this as a staff development opportunity, staff retention opportunity, and understand that it's also a contribution to the bigger picture and support those requests from your tech staff. So I think... Thanks. So I think we've only got a few minutes left, but I would like to make sure that both John and Kennedy get an opportunity to answer any questions that some of you may have. So do we have any specific questions from anyone in the audience? We got one back. Why don't you, John, Kennedy, why don't you guys come back up and raise your questions?
Okay, sorry. So. My background, I've seen a lot of these, and this is a question for all the presenters. A lot of these challenges that, the internet exists in Europe and the US and everywhere else needs to get there to get to the internet kind of thing. And there's been a number of shifts over the years. So the first one was commercial operators installing CDNs and bringing capacity into remote locations. And the first sort of kick in the head was, hold on, suddenly a large proportion of my traffic has shifted from transit to peering, local peering, and that was sort of the first trigger. The next thing was operators like Level 3 and Hurricane Electric establishing POPs in Africa, and I'm guessing elsewhere in the world, to say they're going to take submarine capacity, they're going to have a loss leader, they're going to create new markets in interesting places in the world. And then the third thing that that I've been thinking about, but I've now kind of stepped out of that environment is the blurring line between what is commercial and what is R&E traffic. The idea that you can no longer necessarily say that something that's going to Google is not R&E because a lot of research data may end up on those networks. So I think that the question is, do you experience this, what I'd like to call the existential crisis of R&E networking? What is the experience been in the Pacific or in Kenya?
Thank you for the question. In Kenya, what we look at is so long as the traffic is coming from an educational research institution to or fro, we treat it as R&E because someone could be doing some research on YouTube, on Facebook, on even some adult sites. So we don't. It's R&E. Okay. Then for the CDNs, there's always a question of net neutrality and what you, if you allow one content provider or one CDN provider in your network, their services are perceived to be to work a little better. So what we do is we do not have a limit on who we allow and who we don't allow. So long as you want to host your infrastructure, we are open. We are open for that. So, but with time, we feel most of the traffic will be peering, and that will help us in reducing the pressure on international or IP transit capacity.
Well, again, we were pretty naive about this at the beginning, and we're kind of manipulated by the telecom companies. Our university president was a congressional delegate from Guam. We have a non-voting delegation in the mid-'90s. And in 95 or 96, was it, when the Telecommunications Act was passed, he actually had some input favoring territories like ours. But it didn't really dawn on him or any of us that we really had a right to access that. And the telecoms didn't really come forward and share it with us until David and NSRC started banging around and interviewing people on the island. And then it began to open up the relationship. And now we've found, of course, a very effective strategy is to have them on our boards. Andrew Gale, CEO of the GTA, is on our EPSCoR board, and the DOCOMO people are working closely on NASA and other programs. So it's really opened up. The other area on Guam where we have enormous capacity is DoD. And that cable between Guam and the Marshalls was laid because of the military connection, but they opened half that up from the dark cable. And that's what's accessing or being accessed in Micronesia. And so DoD is becoming more of a partner than they were even just a few years ago.
Yeah, so I think the theme we're hearing here is partnerships and peering, are vital for continued growth of the R&E network community and, frankly, the internet in general. So we're actually out of time, and there's a group popping in to take over this room. So what I'd like to suggest is, as anyone that would still like to talk with John or Kennedy, please feel free to catch them outside the door and ask your questions there. Thanks for coming. Thanks for your interest.